I'm here with Andrea Lowery, Executive Director for Pennsylvania's Historical and Museum Commission. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Liaga.
So just for some background, I know people are probably familiar with the State Museum or a museum that's in their area, but what are all the entities that are included under the Historical and Museum Commission?
Well, we have a fair number that are all engaged in communicating Pennsylvania's history. We are the official state history agency, and our goal is to make history relevant for all Pennsylvanians. So we have the State Museum, as you mentioned, here in Harrisburg, the State Archives, which is also in Harrisburg. Affiliated with that is the State Records Center. We've got 28 historic sites and museums across the Commonwealth. And in addition to that, we have the State Historic Preservation Office, which is the federally mandated portion of our office. They help communities preserve the built environment that they care about, whether it's through National Register nomination or through preservation grants, things like that.
And up to date, throughout this pandemic, have any of those offices or of these historic sites or museums been able to reopen, or are they still closed until further notice?
They are physically closed right now, but we have transitioned to being online. We have moved, we were already moving in a digital fashion to, with the goal of really increasing access to our collections, whether those are our buildings or our sites or the documents in the archives, which holds everything from William Penn's charter to notes from 9/11 from the police commissioner responding to the Flight 93. And so we were already in the process of moving in that realm, but we just certainly have increased our offerings, transitioned over to a lot of programming that's online, educational offerings that are online, and really moving some of our processes like our environmental review, which the State Historic Preservation Office does online. So while we are not physically open, we are still offering the same services in a different way.
And on the topic of those physical locations that aren't open at the moment, especially for some of those museums or sites that would typically have exhibits that would rotate monthly or by the seasons, what has been going on inside those places during this pandemic? Have they been updated, or are they exactly as they were before the pandemic started?
No, we are in the process of updating, anticipating to reopen. And I should also clarify, our grounds at our sites are open. So for example, Bushy Run Battlefield, there is an extensive property there. Brandywine Battlefield, many of our sites do have grounds that are open. The Pennsylvania Lumber Museum, which is up in Potter County in the northern tier. So we do have, and some of those do have outdoor exhibits like Drake Well up in Venango County, which talks about the history of oil in Pennsylvania. So those exterior amenities are still open. It's, as you say, the interior, which has remained closed. And yes, we are updating our exhibits. At the State Museum, we are currently hanging our Art of the State, which is an annual event that it typically launches in June. And obviously with the pandemic, we haven't been able to do that. So we will be offering that virtual tours and artist conversations online. Our sites, Landis Valley has an exhibit that just went up and is programming virtually. So we are transitioning and anticipating reopening.
Throughout this pandemic, a lot of us have been lucky enough to be able to work at home, but for some people like the archivists and preservationists, they maybe haven't been able to do that because they deal with such important items. How have those people's work changed during this pandemic?
Well, fortunately, we have been able to keep our people, even those who rely on interacting with physical collections, working. As I mentioned, we're putting a lot of our collections online. So we have digitized 17.5 million documents in the archives and are putting those up right now. I would add that sounds like a lot, but it's a drop in the bucket. We've got 250 million documents in the archives, so there's much to be done still. They're busy indexing land records that are used frequently by the public. The same thing with our historic sites and museums. So our curators we've recently launched an online database for our collections, and they have, since the pandemic began, put a great number of artifacts into that database, which is available online. And so we have 10,000 artifacts. We have many, many artifacts. We have more than 500,000 that are history related, and another 8 million that are archaeologically related. So again, there's much work to be done, but there's a lot of backup housework that needs to be done as a part of that and creating those records. And similarly for environmental review, we were already in the process of transitioning to a digital way to manage that. So when historic resources is impacted by a publicly funded, whether that's state or federal funding project, then it comes to us for an environmental review to look at the impact on the historic resources. And so we were initially, before the pandemic, receiving many of those electronically, but still about 100 a week in terms of hard copy. And that has dropped to 2 to 3 a week. So we've really successfully made that transition, which was already underway. So we've been able to keep many of our people working who you would ordinarily think would have to be tied to a physical workplace. And that said, obviously we have, with having 400 buildings plus and 2,400 acres, our maintenance people have been busy making sure that our buildings are secure and that the grounds are kept up, things like that. So we do have some people in physical locations, but it's very few.
And has the commission received any aid from the state government or the federal government?
Well, a good portion of our funding is provided through general government operations. That has been maintained, and we're very grateful for that. And similarly, federally, because the State Historic Preservation Office is federally mandated, we do receive funding from the feds. And so that has been a stream that has been maintained. Some of our income has declined, obviously, as a result of being closed. We do rely on admissions and facility use. And so we have seen a drop in that, but we've been very lucky in that a good portion of our funding stream has stayed intact.
And for you as executive director and for the whole commission, what would you say has been the biggest challenge throughout this pandemic?
I think it's been being probably flexible and trying to find creative ways to do the things that we really need to make sure we continue to provide for Pennsylvanians. Probably the initial hard stop, we've been gradually transitioning to a more digital, more web-based way of being, but to sort of have to come to that realization immediately was certainly a challenge.
And on the topic of a lot of those online resources, they're a great outlet for children, especially who would love to typically go to the museum and see all these things. Could you talk more about the online resources that are available, especially to children and school-age kids?
Absolutely. So, we have a number of popular programs. The State Museum runs a curator's choice where they'll talk about an artifact once a week, a social media post relative to that. We also have a program that focuses on what you see in your backyard, and really helping kids go out, because we deal not only with cultural history but natural history, go out and see what's around them and be able to look and understand their environment. We've got a program that's been incredibly popular on state symbols that we have posted through social media and lives on our YouTube page online. We also have been doing a number of puzzles and games and various jigsaw puzzles for coloring pages for kids that are geared with a history bent. And we're looking forward to doing more. We have a number of other programs in the works that we're talking about.
And finally, where can people find all this information on new exhibits or new online resources, or just new information or information on when the museums and sites will hopefully open soon? Where can people find all that info? So
our website is phmc.pa.gov, and everything is there. You can find our online collections there. You can find links to all the archival documents that have been scanned. You can find the various sites and the plans for them. And in addition to that, obviously social media. Each site and the State Museum and the archives and PHMC all have social media channels, and we publicize through those as well.
All right, Andrea Lowery, Executive Director of Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
PCN offers Pennsylvania organizations, business, and associations the opportunity to have their message telecast statewide. Fusion on PCN is a platform for you to reach out to all of Pennsylvania using our statewide cable network and online streaming. You produce the content with your message, and PCN delivers it statewide. Fusion is a partnership that helps expand your reach and meet objectives through an alliance with PCN. Go to pcntv.com/fusion for more information.
I'm here with State Representative Mike Reese, Republican representing parts of Westmoreland and Somerset counties. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Leaga. I appreciate it.
So you and some of your colleagues recently announced legislation about school sports. Can you just tell us about your bills and why they're necessary?
Yeah, sure. So we've introduced a couple bills in a package, myself and my colleague, Representative Topper, who's from Bedford County. My bill, House Bill 2787, would basically empower our local school districts to make the decision on if they return to fall sports, and if so, how they do it and how they do it safely. Basically, that follows the same premise that the governor used in opening up our schools this fall. He turned it over to them saying, look, you are the professionals. You are the folks who are elected at the local level. You know your school district. You know your teachers, you know your coaches, you know your administrators, you know what's going on in your district. Come up with a health and safety plan to return to school and go do it. And so what we did was we took that concept, that idea, and basically put sports with it and said, look, you guys can do the same with sports that you did with your calendar for returning to academics. You can figure out, how do you play football if you can, if it can be done safely? How do you play volleyball and soccer and golf, or have our band members on a Friday night marching, or cheerleaders out there? So, we empower them to make a decision on how to return to those activities in the fall, and also whether or not there could be people there watching the activities, and how to do that safely following the CDC guidelines. The second bill, introduced by Representative Topper, is a little bit different. It recognizes that there may not be some activities going on, and the opportunity for academic success might be diminished, along with athletic opportunities. So Representative Topper's bill would allow for students, if they so choose, to have another year of eligibility.
And you and several of your colleagues also wrote a letter to the governor asking him to rescind his recommendation to cancel those school sports for the fall. Have you heard any responses to that letter?
No, unfortunately, we haven't received a response yet from the governor. And look, I think Representative Seth Grove did a really nice job on his right to know law and asking the governor and the Secretary of Health, hey, look, what information did you have when you made this recommendation? And of course, we have since heard that they didn't really have any granular data to substantiate the recommendation that they made, but they rather pointed to what other states were doing and what was going in other parts in the country. So, obviously, we have some concerns with using that information to make a decision here in Pennsylvania.
And where are your bills in the legislative process at the moment?
Sure. So right at the beginning, just last week, we circulated co-sponsor memos. That's the process where we put the concept out there for our colleagues to look at and ask them if they would like to sign on as co-sponsors in support of the bill. We did that last Friday. I believe we introduced the bill officially on Tuesday with the numbers 2787 and 2788. And so now they are currently introduced. The speaker will refer them to a committee. I believe they'll be going to the Education Committee. That's probably the most appropriate place. And we've already had conversations with our Education Chairman, Majority Chairman, Representative Kurt Sonny. Representative Sonny, Chairman Sonny, is a co-sponsor on the bills. He's very supportive of the bills, and he's committed to us that he wants to run those bills out as soon as possible.
In the past several weeks, several counties across Pennsylvania have experienced some surges of COVID-19 cases. How is COVID-19 in your district?
Right now, so we're fortunate. We have a great healthcare system in Westmoreland County. It's the Excella system. We have a great new CEO. His name is John Spahn. And of course, John Spahn has been in constant communication with the delegation, letting us know where his healthcare system is with COVID-19. And right now, obviously, our numbers are very low. Hospitalization rate is very low. The vast majority of beds are still available. And when I say vast majority, like 95% based on what we're being told. So the outbreak obviously is very low here. So, I guess that's the point of the legislation, is that the Commonwealth is very diverse. What works in Philadelphia might not work in Pittsburgh. What works in Westmoreland might not work in Erie or Reading. So we have to empower locally elected officials to make decisions based on what's going on in their community. So yeah, that's where we're at.
And aside from sports and schools reopening, what are some of the main concerns that you hear from people in your district? I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Aside from schools reopening and your sports bill, what are some of the main concerns that you hear from people in your district?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll say this. I think it's the fact that they feel government has been very heavy-handed in its approach to managing this. I have many, many small businesses, particularly restaurants, who are just absolutely struggling to keep their doors open. Their businesses have obviously been greatly diminished by some of the orders coming out of this administration, and they're fighting for their survival. And look, I think some of these small businesses probably won't survive this, and ultimately won't be a part of our economy. And I think that's a big, big concern. Look, small businesses are the engine of our economy here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Every small business we lose hurts our economy. So I'm hearing a lot about that. I'm hearing a lot from parents who want their kids to go back to some sense of normal. They want their kids back at school as much as possible, recognizing we have to be safe and we have to take certain precautions, because we certainly don't want to enhance the spread of COVID-19. But again, I think it's incumbent upon us as elected officials to treat the people that we represent like adults, and give them good information to go on, and then ask them to go ahead and live their lives. And frankly, I think for our kids, it's just absolutely critical that we get them back to some level of normal.
And finally, what further legislation are you working on, or are you hoping to see in the future to help continue to support these people and businesses who have been affected by COVID-19?
Yeah, so there's several pieces of legislation that have been introduced to help our small businesses, to help our economy. Our colleague, a good friend, a member of the leadership team in the House, Representative Kurt Mosser, has several bills dealing with restaurants that I sure hope we take up in the very near future. So we have a lot of work to do.
All right. State Representative Mike Reese, Republican representing parts of Westmoreland and Somerset County. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Leona, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
PCN brings the distinct aspects of Pennsylvania and its residents to your favorite screen.
Hear from state government and community leaders during unedited, balanced coverage of politics and policy.
Dig into the rich history and culture of the state, presented by notable residents and historians.
Score a view of the best high school, college, and world-class athletes competing across the state, and much, much more.
Start exploring the Keystone State today on PCN and the PCN app.
I'm here with Dan Betancourt, President and CEO of the Community First Fund. Thank you for being with us today.
Nice to meet you.
So just for some background, can you describe what your organization, Community First Fund, does?
Sure. Community First Fund is based in South Central Pennsylvania in the Harrisburg, Lancaster, Reading, York area, and we are an economic development organization, but our specialty is we provide loans to small business owners. We also get involved in community development projects across the region.
And like you just mentioned, Community First Fund is one of many, let me read this, community development financial institutions, and you serve as the chair of the Pennsylvania CDFI network. Can you describe what that organization does? And
sure.
Yeah.
I serve as the president of a local community development financial institution, or CDFI, but I also chair the statewide PA CDFI network. And you may have heard recently we launched, along with the state, a $225 million small business grant program. We just finished our first round. We just funded $100 million. And the next round of that program just opened up on Monday. It'll be open to the end on August 28th, where we'll fund the second final round of $100 million in grants.
Can you talk more about the Small Business Assistance Program and the specific round of aid, $96 million, as you mentioned, and who it reaches?
Sure. Well, that is for statewide. $96 million went out. We just approved $5,000 grants, 5,000 grants, I should say. and the average grant was $20,000. And we had, a lot of applicants. A lot of applicants applying the program. We had over 50,000 applicants, and we approved 5,000, as I said. And what it goes to show is the economic pain that small businesses are experiencing in Pennsylvania because of COVID.
Is there a specific demographic group or type of businesses that have been benefiting the most from these grants?
Well, the grants were focused on a couple industry sectors, including restaurants and personal care, like barbershops and hair salons, daycare centers, retail, hospitality, among other industries. Mostly the ones that were the hardest hit and had to close down because of COVID.
And how can businesses qualify and apply to these grants?
Well, right now, round two is open. The final $100 million that we're going to grant out. It opened on Monday, and it's open through the end of the month, August 28th at midnight. And the best thing to do is go to www.pabusinessgrants.com. www.pabusinessgrants.com. You can go there. You can look for any one of the 17 organizations that are listed there. Click that logo, and you can go in there and apply for that grant. There are a couple parameters that the big one is your sales need to be less than $1 million, and you have to be less than 25 employees. But most businesses that are for-profit are eligible for that.
We've seen this pandemic disproportionately affect Black and Brown and marginalized communities. What are some of the things that your organization and the CDFI network are doing to specifically address the needs of those communities and those businesses in those communities?
Well, in the very beginning of the pandemic, we helped a lot of businesses apply for PPP loans, SBA PPP loans, and there was a lot of criticism of the banks because they were favoring their clients. They were focused on their clients applying, and a lot of businesses owned by people of color may have had limited relationships or no relationship with the bank, and so therefore many were shut out of that program. And the state program that you talked about, that we're talking about here, the PA Assistance Grant Program, came out of that frustration, came out of that knowledge, knowing that small business owners of color did not get those federal dollars. And so we approached the state governor, the governor, and the legislature and said we should, as a CDFI network who are on the ground, who know the mom and pop businesses that are being affected, we would like to administer that program. And they agreed and provided us $225 million to re-grant out to these small businesses that did not get money through PPP or other sources.
You mentioned some of the parameters required to qualify for the grants. Are there any parameters or restrictions on what the grants can be used for in the businesses?
It's very simple. As long as you show and certify that the uses are because of losses from COVID or to adapt to changes for COVID, then you can use that money. And what we have found is that the losses that business owners have had far exceed any grant that they can find. You're not going to be able to grow or expand your business. This is just to help you with some of the losses that you've had in your business.
What are some of the main responses that you've heard from people who have received these grants or are seeking to receive these grants?
It's funny, talking. It's always a great day whenever you can provide a grant to a business owner that's lost money. Yesterday, one of my colleagues said we had our first client in tears over it because she was a small restaurant and knew that this was going to help her reopen or buy, food or inventory and be able to restart her business. And so it's kind of like that. I mean, on the flip side, we have a call center. And I'm pretty sure they're going to have PTSD or whatever, some post-traumatic, because they heard all those stories, all that pain. And after a while, it does affect you. But then on the other hand, when you get to help a business owner, the joy, and that can alleviate a lot of the concern. But quite frankly, it was less about us. These clients are hurting. And the legislature, I think, heard that pain and helped fund this program to help those small business owners.
Those $96 million that we mentioned were from the first round of the grants, and there's applications are now open for this second round of grants. How long is the application period for the second round?
It's 15 days, and that's why it's open through August the 28th of this month.
And finally, are there plans for, this is a finite amount for this specific grant program. Are there plans for a new grant program afterwards, or even in your own organization, to continue to provide assistance to people who need it?
Well, it's interesting because the counties in the area all got their own federal stimulus allotment beyond the state grant that we put together with the CDFI network. So some of the counties in the area are creating their own small business grant programs in addition to the state. So right now, Community First Fund is working with Berks County and York County to create their own funds to supplement or augment what the state did. And Lancaster County just finished their second and final round for a $25 million fund just for county small businesses. So I would say 3 or 4 counties just in this South Central Pennsylvania region have created their own funds to augment the state program that we talked about.
And is there any further action by the state or the federal government that you'd like to see to help either organizations like yours or businesses that you're assisting as well?
Sure. As I said, in round 1, we got almost $1 billion in requests for a $100 million round. So clearly, and then we're talking about statewide, clearly the losses far exceed what the legislature gave us. While we're grateful, we are in early conversations with them to provide more grant money for small businesses across the state. There's no assurances. I think it's a long shot, but we will continue to fight on behalf of small businesses, especially businesses owned by people of color.
All right. Dan Betancourt, President and CEO of Community First Fund, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Good to talk to you.